Oh great, Joe Tate is sinking to new lows now that he can almost taste victory in his bid to claim Butler's farm in Emmerdale. He's the sort of person who would sacrifice his own brother's kidney to save himself. So it's hardly shocking that when he sets his sights on success, he'll stop at nothing, even if that means sending an innocent woman to jail and attempting to swindle a terminally ill man out of his property. For years, he has been determined to take control of Moira Dingle's farm, and when the chance arose to set her up for people trafficking as a way to seize the land, he jumped at it without hesitation. He has already secured Robert Sugden's property through blackmail, and now Butler's farm is firmly in his sights. With Moira behind bars, his only remaining obstacle is Cain Dingle. Cain is barely coping, fighting to protect the farm while also struggling with his own health crisis. His hold on the land is weakening, yet his pride prevents him from reaching out for support. Lydia Dingle offers to look after the boys for a few days to ease his burden, but he refuses to accept the help. Once she departs, his emotional devastation becomes painfully obvious. Unfortunately, this couldn't come at a worse moment, as Joe is preparing to escalate matters, and Cain will need every ounce of strength to withstand what's coming. Joe's next scheme involves calling for a herd inspection over fears of tuberculosis. With a potential outbreak looming, the farm is placed under strict restrictions until it receives official clearance. As pressures mount and everything begins to fall apart, he repeats his tempting offer to buy the property just as Cain is at his lowest ebb. Luckily, Matty stands firmly by Cain's side and is resolved to keep the farm running for Moira, believing it's not yet time to surrender. Still, there's a sense that Joe's ruthless strategies are only beginning. The question remains, how much longer can Cain resist him? Cain Dingle understands that Sarah Sugden has good intentions, but he's becoming more and more frustrated by her refusal to truly hear what he's saying. At present, Sarah and Liam Kavanagh are the only members of his inner circle aware of his prostate cancer diagnosis. Graham Foster is also in the know, yet Cain has no intention of paying attention to any of the guidance he keeps offering. Since Liam is often tied up with work, Sarah has been the one accompanying Cain to most of his hospital visits. She continues to insist that he'd feel relieved if he opened up to the rest of the family about his illness, though Cain firmly disagrees. Last week, she tried a new tactic to lift her grandfather's spirits by proposing they steal luxury cars. In her mind, it would serve as a distraction for Cain, and the cash from selling the vehicles could ease the financial strain on Butler's farm. Recently, the pair made off with Joe Tate's DeLorean, but Cain made it clear that if he carried on with the thefts, Sarah wouldn't be involved. However, events took a different turn when she arrived later and joined him in executing another plan. After swiping another high-end vehicle, they narrowly avoided being apprehended. As they sat discussing their apparent success, a passing police car forced them to duck down in their seats. While Sarah relished the adrenaline rush, Cain became irritated by her failure to grasp the seriousness of the danger they were in. She urged him to keep stealing cars, convinced it could solve the farm's mounting money troubles. Although she sensed he wasn't ready to quit, she couldn't understand why he was so determined to exclude her. Sarah cares deeply for her grandfather and only wants to support him, but Cain's patience is wearing thin because she won't accept his repeated claims that he's coping just fine. The trouble with Joe Tate is his belief that no one can outmaneuver him. Whenever he spots a deal that promises to boost his fortune, he pursues it relentlessly, regardless of the fallout. Collateral damage rarely troubles him. Although profit is usually his driving force, a darker edge emerges whenever he feels threatened. Last year, viewers learned he required a kidney transplant, and he showed little concern for doing things the right way. In his desperation to find a donor match, he even drugged Noah Dingle and transported him to a private clinic. When tests revealed Noah wasn't suitable, Joe abandoned him by the roadside in a dazed state. That chain of events ultimately led to the devastating limo crash that claimed the lives of Susie, Layla, and Amy. This time, his ruthless streak has resurfaced due to Kim Tate's ambitious land scheme. She intends to purchase all the property surrounding Home Farm and has enlisted Joe's support. However, his laser focus wavered when Graham Foster shockingly returned. Making it clear he had unfinished business, Graham sought to rebuild their bond, and Joe agreed to let him back in. As Graham has been catching up on the past 6 years of Joe's life, he's experienced a surge of conflicting emotions with each revelation. Hearing Joe speak warmly about his relationship with Dawn Taylor clearly surprised him. Realizing how much Joe values his new family at Home Farm left Graham startled by the apparent change in him, though quietly pleased as well. What hasn't impressed him, however, is the aggressive land acquisition plan Joe and Kim are pursuing. While Graham supports the idea of strengthening the Tate legacy, he believes it should be done with integrity. He has already voiced his disapproval of Joe exploiting Victoria Sugden and Moira Dingle, and he reiterated his concerns again. Suspicion deepened when Joe discovered Graham browsing rental properties. Graham admitted he'd been considering a move and suggested Joe join him, proposing that Dawn and the children could relocate too for a clean slate. Graham's concern is that Joe has fallen too far under Kim's influence. He seems convinced that distance from her would help Joe rediscover his true self. In a candid moment, Graham warned him that the authority he currently wields is toxic and could permanently alter him if he doesn't step back. Later, he announced he would remain in the village near his relatives, clearly determined to keep watch. Speculation about Graham's loyalty intensified when Kim caught him in conversation with Cain Dingle. Convinced they might be conspiring, Kim instructed Joe to test Graham by asking him to carry out an inventory check at Butler's farm. Instead of following orders blindly, Graham informed Cain about the plan. Aware that Cain is battling cancer, he couldn't help but feel sympathy for him. It didn't take long for Joe to realize Graham had deceived him, and the betrayal hit hard. Despite this, Graham refused to move out of Home Farm, frustrating Kim, perhaps because he sensed Joe secretly didn't want him gone. He told Joe there are details he doesn't yet understand, but insisted he can't reveal them. So is Graham preparing to double-cross Joe? Or could his real target be Kim instead? Emmerdale is typically broadcast on weeknights on ITV at 8 p.m, and episodes are made available earlier. Emmerdale's Paddy Kirk is at breaking point. After weeks of anxiety over his father, Bear Wolf, he finally allowed himself a flicker of hope when he discovered Bear had scheduled another counselling session with Lucy. That optimism didn't last. Bear learned that Laurel Thomas intended to attend Ray Walters' funeral and decided he needed to go too. Confronting the man who abused him and whom he later killed was painfully difficult, yet Bear felt compelled to seek closure and believed paying his respects was the least he could do. Coping with the emotional fallout proved overwhelming. He spent the entire night drinking, attempting to block out both his thoughts and the ongoing pain from the arm injury he sustained on the farm. Hoping for relief, he turned to Manpreet Sharma for medication, but she refused, mindful of his history with addiction. Desperate and angry, Bear deliberately hurt his hand and headed to A&E, assuming he could obtain painkillers there. When he encountered Jacob Gallagher, his frustration intensified after the junior doctor explained he wasn't authorized to prescribe the medication independently. In a frightening moment, Bear placed Jacob in the same wrestling hold he had used on Ray before his death. Thankfully, Jacob managed to free himself by knocking over a trolley, jolting Bear out of the confrontation. Emmerdale is typically broadcast on weeknights on ITV at 8 p.m, and episodes are made available earlier the same day on ITVX from 7 a.m.